Bueno, bienvenidos a la cuarta edición de la Conf UY. Estamos con David Giard de Microsoft. Bueno, David, tell us about you. What are your field of expertise and what are you working right now?
Well, I am a technical evangelist for Microsoft, which means that my job is to play with toys and learn how to use those toys and then teach other people how to use those toys, which is pretty much the best job in the world. Recently, I've been working a lot with Microsoft Azure, which is our cloud computing platform, and learning that. It's a big field. There are many, many services, and I'm sharing them with people around me.
Okay. About the talk you just gave, cognitive services and big data, how are companies taking advantage of them?
So start with cognitive services was a talk that I gave here at .NET Conf UY yesterday, and this is a really interesting set of tools because it allows companies to use machine learning without actually knowing a lot about machine learning. Machine learning is kind of a hard problem, and it takes a lot of compute power, and it takes a lot of data, and it takes a lot of time, but cognitive services are web services. They're REST APIs in which the machine learning has been done for you. And so you can call them and just with a simple web service call, you can add image recognition or facial recognition or analysis of text or language, things like that, things that would ordinarily take a lot of processing power, a lot of code, with just a single call. So it's simplified a lot of applications. And people are using that for things like authentication of users by recognition of faces. They're doing it for recognizing the sentiment of text to read through lots of articles or blog posts or news stories or product reviews and find out what people are saying about them. They can automate that process, things like that, things that would ordinarily take either a lot of manual labor, a lot of compute power, and makes that available. And big data has been around a long time. It's just the analysis of large sets of data that don't really fit well into relational schemes because one, they're so big that the technologies can't handle them, and two, because they often come from multiple data sources. And big data used to be really expensive, but now with cloud computing, it makes sense to just rent the compute power that you need for big data and for storage. And now that small companies can take advantage of big data without spending a huge amounts of money.
An example you can...
An example of big data would be, so what happens with a lot of companies is they build applications and they collect a lot of data from consumers. They've been selling online, their widgets or whatever services or products they've been selling online for years, and they've brought in all this data about what people are buying, where they're coming from, what kind of people, what geography they're from, what products they tend to buy together. Sometimes you can get information about their background and their income from their credit history, but analyzing that data and figuring out trends and how to market those people is a big challenge, and it can make companies a lot more responsive if they can look at general trends of customer history and say, people that are from Uruguay who have bought these products, they might be interested in these other products or these other services, and you could target more directly, so they're getting less kind of random junk marketing, and it's more sending them information about the products that are really interested in.
Are related with social networks.
Social network, for example, same thing. Facebook uses big data analysis a lot, for example, and so they're targeting their content based on what you posted and what you've been reading and what you've been liking on your history.
Okay. What are the three main technologies you would recommend to get into next year?
Well, the first one would be cloud computing. So cloud computing, I like to think that it has democratized computing. So it's a really revolutionary thing. It used to be in the old days that if you wanted to get into computer technology, you had to go work for a company that could afford to buy a mainframe. And then the personal computer came along, and now for $2,000 or $3,000 of hardware, you could buy a computer and you could do the work of you can become a software consultant by yourself in your basement. And that really democratized things. The next step, the next revolutionary step, I think, is cloud computing, where you don't even have to buy any servers at all. You can rent space in the cloud. And so if I were starting a company now, I would never buy a server. I would do everything in the cloud and do the services. And even if I'm a big company, I have an investment, and I start to retire those servers, I think about renting them. So cloud computing is one. Machine learning, I think, is a big one. Machine learning takes advantage of cloud computing. It's been around a long time, but because compute power is much cheaper now, and because we can rent it in cloud services like Microsoft Azure, then now it's seen an explosion. I always tell people that if you add the words machine learning to your LinkedIn profile, your recruiters will start spamming you like crazy, because there's so many jobs out there looking for people with experience in machine learning. And the third one, I think there's a big growth in client-side web technologies right now that I've just started to get back into. About a year ago, I began to do web development again after stopping for a while, and it's amazing that the proliferation of JavaScript frameworks that are out there. The world has changed so much. I felt like, have you ever seen these movies where somebody falls asleep for 100 years, or they go off into space and they come back and 1,000 years have passed and the world is completely different, they don't recognize it at all? I feel like that for the few years I was away from web technologies. It has changed, so I think that's an area that's exploding right now.
Like Angular,
React, or Vue, or I mean, they change all the time. I think while we're talking, 2 new JavaScript frameworks were created.
Great. Well, you have a show in Channel 9. What is this about?
Oh, thank you for asking. I do have a show. It's called Technology and Friends, and I've been doing this show for about 8 years now. I started it at a conference very much like this one in America, a conference called Code Match. I brought a camera and I brought a microphone, and I just started talking to people and said for a few minutes, just tell me about what you're working on and describe this technology. And I published them on, at the time, I think I published them on YouTube. And then I moved over to a paid service. And when I joined Microsoft 4 years ago, I moved to Channel 9. It's a lot like what we're doing here right now. My shows are, I'll sit down with a technologist and I'll just find out what they're passionate about and get them to describe that. And often it's a technology they'll dive deep into, something like Angular or cognitive services. But sometimes it's more about just the field in general, the things that are of interest to technologists. I talked to a young lady this morning who gave the keynote at this conference on women entrepreneurs in technology. And she had a great perspective, because this is a big issue in the United States, that women are underrepresented. But apparently it's a worldwide thing. It's the same issues that we face in America are happening here in South America. So it's just fascinating to talk to her, and I hope that my viewers like it too.
Great. Well, it's your first time here. Did you like the conference?
First time in South America. Oh, I loved it. Oh my gosh. I tell you what, not only is it experience a new country, a new culture, but I have to tell you, people have been really nice to me. I mean, just not just nice in general, but personally nice to me. I really appreciate that. That's just a good feeling.
Will you come back this year?
Am I invited?
Yes,
yeah,
of course.
Absolutely. I'd love to come back.
Thank you.
Thank you.